r/AskReddit. Teachers of Reddit, what has one of your students done that convinced you they were a villain in the making? Sweetest little 6th grade girl, you know the type, blonde curly hair, blue eyes, polite to a fault, very popular, etc, etc. Discovered she had an online account where she had planned out, very carefully, mind you, exactly how she was going to kill me and a colleague at the end of the year, tied up to 2 chairs, back to back, so that she'd only have to use the 1 bullet from her dad's gun. I'd die instantly while my colleague would go second. Suspended for 5 days, moved from our classes, and allowed to remain at the school for her 7th and 8th grade year. Oh, and the restraining order keeping her at the opposite end of the campus from our classrooms. I shit you not. Edit 6/12. Holy snapping arseholes. I feel like I hijacked the sub 4700 points. Wow. So, I'll try to give a little more info for all of the questioners. Her friends ratted her out to the admin about a week after the posts hit the internet. They were on some site called Ask.fm. She had responded to a question. Paraphrased, how would you kill the teacher or teachers you hate the most? The tying up statement, she had indicated that a few friends would help ambush us in the morning when school hadn't started and it was still dark. No clues as to how the ambush would work, but she was quite specific in how we would be tied to the chairs. We never found out why. Her parents, of course, blamed us. They were very strict, and she was just acting out. She was just talking, she would never really do it. She has no guns. Of course, after the punishment had been handed out it was discovered that dad did own a couple of firearms. The punishment was decided upon by the school district, not our administration. The police were called in to investigate, but, after a few months, it was determined by them that she most likely, their words, would not have been able to carry out the threat, so no criminal charges were ever filed. Civil case was never followed through. We protested the fact that she was going to be allowed to stay at our campus, and were told specifically that, if we didn't like that, we were free to seek another campus to teach at. Again, not the school, but the district's response. The restraining order forced her classes to be at the opposite end of our rooms, which meant she couldn't hang with her friends during the day. She was regulated to 5 rooms in the same building, well away from us. Of course, if we needed to go to the office every day, we'd end up walking by her rooms of our own free will. We both decided that, if we had to walk by her rooms, we'd walk sideways, so that we could always be watching her through the window, just in case she did try anything. Just walking by and staring at her was lots of fun. Also, if I ever found her down by my end of the campus, I would point at her and yell, "You're not supposed to be here. Get back to your end of the school, or I'm calling the police." And off she'd run, while I reported her violation to the office and the school police. That earned her another 2 days of suspension every time. We informed her 7th and 8th grade teachers about the situation as she moved up the ladder. We showed them the transcripts from the internet postings, the police investigation and report documents, and made sure they kept an eye on her. I doubt she enjoyed her final 2 years at the school. Last year, 14/15, was her final year on campus, so the situation is over, unless, of course, she decides to come and visit her other teachers. In which case, I'll just yell at her again to get away from my room. And yes, we also found out who her high school teachers were and sent them the information as well. I'm not a teacher, but there was this one kid who lived next door to me. He went to private school, I went to public, so we never really got to know each other. This guy, we will call him Jack. He was 2 years older than me, and he was the most straight-laced kid I have ever met. You ever know a really preppy, annoying kid who is just so perfect that you have an irrational hatred for him? That was Jack. Anyways, one day, when I was in 4th grade, and he was in 6th, I caught him chasing around a rabbit with a baseball bat. He literally tried to beat the living piss out of that rabbit. I was too shocked to do anything. When he saw me watching, he just grinned and walked back inside. Few years later, I walk up to the 7-Eleven to go buy a grape soda, cause grape soda is the fucking bomb. I saw Jack there, he was with his buddies. I tried to be polite and waved to him. He was holding a pair of sunglasses presumably from the rack in the store. As I exited the store, he rushed back out of the store and tapped me on the shoulder. He thanked me. I asked him what for, and he pointed to the pair of sunglasses that were in my book bag's water bottle pouch. I screamed at him, right there in front of the store. I had a future too. I couldn't get in trouble for shoplifting. He told me better me than him, and could he have his sunglasses back? I threw them on the ground and smashed them. He went into the store and reported me for shoplifting. I told the store clerk what actually happened, and both of our parents came. Essentially everyone believed him because of the straight-laced, preppy reputation that he had. He was a starting QB at his respective school and held a 4.0 GPA, and while I got good grades too, I had a streak of mischief. Nothing serious, but he was more believable. As I got into my mum's car, he again gave me that awful grin. He knew he had gotten away with something. Sophomore year for me, senior year of HS for him. His dad, whom I had tremendous respect for, asked if I could mow his lawn every week, and he would pay me $10. I said he didn't have to pay me, but he insisted. I mowed every Friday morning, while the dad was at work. The dad never paid me, even though he said he would. I was fine with this though. Their dad was a disabled military vet, and I wanted to help him out. It was only a few weeks later that I found out the son had been telling his dad that he had been mowing the lawn, and his dad had been paying him $10 a week. Now, he had only received $80. That should have been mine, but keep in mind, that is a lot of money for a 10th grader. So, instead of telling his parents, or simply stealing the money back, my brain hatched a new idea. I broke into his house when they were on vacation and went into his room. Unsurprisingly, I found his drug stash and put a bag of weed in his binders for school. Later that week, my buddy who also went to that school said that their QB was suspended for 5 days because drugs fell out of his books and onto the floor of his classroom. Jack graduated at the top of his class and went to an Ivy League school. Recently, years after this story, he was convicted of embezzlement, and his wife is coming forward with rape allegations. I think I witnessed the birth of a truly evil human being. Sorry for the long block of text, just wanted to share my story about an evil person I knew as an adolescent. Not a teacher, but the victim. I changed schools in 4th grade to a really preppy private school. I had just been diagnosed with Asperger's, and this was back when no teachers really knew how to deal with it. Mostly I just kept to myself and played with Pokemon toys. I had trouble communicating and didn't really know how to express myself well. This girl invites me to join her group of friends. Cool. Just got here, and there's new friends. Shortly after that, my new social circle set out to systematically torture me. They would steal my things and throw them over the school wall. They'd steal my Pokemon toys, break off pieces like tails and heads, and leave the appendages on my desk and throw the rest away. They'd call me names and giggle. Do that girl bullshit of I'm your friend. No, I'm not, but in a way, that was way too organized. The teachers didn't believe me when I did find ways to express what was happening, because these were the good girls. Finally one day, my best friend ran up to me and another kid and slammed our foreheads together. I ended up with a black eye. My mom raised holy hell at the principal's office, who had been defending these evil bitches, and they finally searched the clique's desks. In the ringleader's desk, they found a handmade, hand-bound journal. It was basically a detailed calendar of how they were going to torture me every day. They had it dated and timed. Like, the detail and work they put into maintaining this agenda of bullying was ridiculous. This wasn't even some composition book. They made the entire thing by hand and collaborated on it. They had plans on how they were going to bully me for at least the next 3 months. My mom immediately yanked me out of that school. No action was taken against the girls, and their parents denied their little snowflakes doing anything. At my new school after this one, I met kids who had also had the same systematic and recorded torture by the same group of girls. Apparently keeping handmade journals of how they were going to bully kids was just what they did. I did look them up later. One of them went to high school with me after going to rehab for a horrible meth addiction, and the rest of them were either addicts, dropouts, or both. So just thought I would add this. After reading all these posts, I was an awful kid during elementary school. I used to throw tantrums that were so bad they had to call my older sister in to calm me down. I even had one teacher tell my best friend's parents that they shouldn't allow him to hang out with me because I was a bad influence. That led to a lifelong struggle trying to hang out with him because his mom was convinced that I was the one convincing him to do all the bad things that normal adolescent boys do, like smoke weed or sneak out at night. Anyways, I can relate to some of these stories. The social awkwardness or the tantrums all make sense to me. I missed a month of school once because my mom didn't see a point for me to attend, since I was suspended every time I went. The problem for me was my parents were divorced and my dad contributed nothing. My mom was a teacher and usually held down 2 or 3 jobs at a time to make ends meet. When she was home, she would flip out all the time. I assume from the stress of holding down 3 jobs at a time and also obtaining her master's degree while raising 4 kids by herself. I went to therapy from 2nd grade till 9th grade, learning how to not be angry all the time. When you grow up poor and hungry, it's really hard not to be miserable all the time, especially when you're surrounded by people who seem to be having the time of their life. It's hard to relate to other people when no one else is going through what you're going through. Now I'm glad to say that I turned out to be a pretty well-adjusted individual. Therapy absolutely saved my life. One of my biggest problems was that I had a mentally unstable mom who insisted that I was crazy. The majority of my time in therapy was learning how to adjust when you have an inconsistent parent who makes up rules as they go along. I don't blame my mom for anything because I know she did the best she could. No one can be expected to do what she did and remain a sane person. As soon as my sisters and I moved out, she turned into a perfectly reasonable person. I shared this because while I understand some of these stories may seem weird to you, but I can relate to some of them. Growing up in poverty or with a parent who simply isn't the best parent can have a profound impact on children. While I never tortured animals or hurt anyone, I did seem pretty crazy in elementary school. At one point, I had 4 or 5 teachers holding me down during one of my tantrums. I remember being very angry at a world who decided it's acceptable for my mom to have to work 3 jobs while raising 4 kids on her own. It took years of therapy to work through all of that anger. I hope that these stories show how important a livable wage is in our society and to provide proper childcare for people who have to work 50-hour weeks to make ends meet. Obligatory, not a teacher, but in 2nd grade, this girl named Sky transferred into our school halfway through the year. She was smart, friendly, athletic, got perfect grades, pretty, etc. But something felt off about her right from the beginning. She had the 1,000-yard stare thing going on, and her reactions to things seemed a little fake or forced. Sky came from a seriously fucked up family. Her mother was in prison for murdering her father, older brothers, and a babysitter while Sky watched. So the courts gave custody to Sky's grandpa and she ended up going to our school. He was a veteran who served in WWI as a Japanese officer and immigrated to the US after. During show and tell one day she brought in some of his sword and was practically bragging about how many Chinese soldiers he killed with it. That was creepy as hell and the teacher made her stop halfway. One time during recess, we'd found a nest of baby bunnies and were AWWing at them when Sky came over to see what was going on. She picked one up and twisted its head until it made a sickening snap like it was nothing. Another girl told her to stop and she just laughed and threw the dead bunny at her. Sky killed the whole nest like that and we just stood there watching her in shock. I should have ran and got the teacher. I don't know why I didn't. We told the teacher later, but they accused us of making up stories because we were jealous of Sky's good grades. She was put into the gifted program, and after the end of the year she was skipped ahead a grade, so I didn't have to see her every day, thank God. I had gym in middle school with her, and when we were changing I noticed her body had a ton of scars. Maybe she was abused when she was little? I avoided her rather than asking about it. Sky did do one good thing though. There was this douchebag racist bully who started picking on her for being mixed, and she beat the absolute shit out of him. The school decided he provoked the attack with racism, so Sky wasn't punished. After he came back from the hospital, he'd totally changed and started acting like a decent guy, even apologizing to everyone he'd hurt. In high school, she was way worse, but only a few of us who went to the same elementary school with her knew what she was really like. The teachers and administration loved her, and she had most of the students fooled too. She graduated as valedictorian, and at that moment we realized that she'd been systematically eliminating her competition. A girl that was in all the app classes with Sky lost her dog in December of her senior year. A couple days before finals, she came home to find her dog's severed head on her porch. We all felt horrible for her, except Sky, who I don't think could feel anything. The next day she found the rest of it, dismembered, in her bed. The police didn't find anything, but it had to have been Sky. One day there was a lockdown and the police came to search everyone's stuff with drug dogs. Half a dozen students were arrested and expelled. One guy had pot and another had cigarettes, but that was totally expected of them. The rest, who just happened to be in app classes, were caught with crack. I heard someone saw Sky in the office talking to the school resource officer right before the lockdown. I think she planted it and set them up. Someone catfished a shy, socially awkward guy into riding a bus a few hours away to a nearby city, buy an expensive necklace, and meet them at an expensive restaurant. Then they started sending him all sorts of cruel messages about how stupid he was to think someone could actually like him. He tried to hang himself and spent a couple months in a mental hospital. Sky allegedly convinced a couple guys to vandalize the principal's car as a senior prank, then called the police while they were doing it, so they were caught red-handed. They did enough damage to be charged with felonies and were expelled. Sky not only got into an Ivy League university, but got a full-ride scholarship there too. Her grandpa passed away, and she inherited his huge creepy house, a shitload of forest around it, and his businesses. Last I heard, she'd graduated and is some sort of executive at a big company. I would not be surprised at all if I turned on the news one day and there's 100 FBI agents digging up bodies behind her house. I taught at a pretty rough school for a while. I had 2 pairs of students I was convinced would be arrested, and they were only middle schoolers. The worst thing was that one pair was in 7th and one pair was in 8th grade, and I was convinced that they were working together in some sort of middle school mob. Kids 1 and 2, 7th graders 1213 years old. One would walk in class and would never do what was asked of him, wouldn't even sit in a seat. He would bring Gamma Boys and other things that I would take from him since they were banned in school. Each time I would ask him to do something or take something away that he wasn't allowed to have, he would have a meltdown. I mean a fucking meltdown. Crying, screaming, like a 2-year-old. Kid 2 was some sort of conniving genius. He would purposefully act dumb so he wouldn't have to do any work. He was diagnosed with a bunch of things like ADHD, social disorders and other problems. He received an IEP because of it, Individualized Education Program. Basically it's a legal document schools use to ensure students with issues are getting the correct help and accommodations so that they can do their work. His IEP it listed he needed 5-minute breaks every 5 minutes and that he could bring toy because the toys calmed him down. Really? I personally didn't buy it, especially because he was diagnosed to have social problems with his classmates and had a hard time making friends. But when the students had a free period or during lunch, Kid 2 had no problems talking to students and being an ass overall. But the real reason Kid 1 and 2 were villains in the making was that Kid 1 and 2 were friends and they left a notebook in my classroom one day. I read through it because they were always writing in it during class. The notebook accounted a bunch of nasty information about their classmates and teachers, including me. It was kinda like a burn book. It had speculations about a student with an eating disorder, a classmate's suicidal father, the principal and her failing marriage. I turned it in, and most of the things in the book were true. The school counselor confirmed it. Kids 3 and 4, 8th graders 1415 years old. Kid 3 had an IEP that listed he had defiance disorder, or as I like to call it, he was a psychopath. Basically if you were a teacher, parent, coach or anyone in authority he wouldn't do anything you asked him to do. Cursed me out on multiple occasions and had to be removed many times. After many incidents there would be a conference with me, the teacher, Kid 3, his parent, the principal and the dean. Each time at the end of the meeting he would give this really creepy apology about how he would never do anything bad again. It was totally insincere, and it reminded me of the scene in Harry Potter 2 and 6 when Tom Riddle talks to Dumbledore in 2 and Sloane in 6. like he was in control of the situation, rather than the adults in the room, or like he was Professor X and able to mind control us. Creepy. Kid 3 was friends with Kid 4 who was more like the Hulk, and would just go apeshit when he was disciplined. He broke his hand twice, both times when he was given a detention. He punched a window, broke it, and punched a locker, broke that too. He was an 8th grader, and was dating a senior at the school. He would come to school in sleeveless shirts that would show scratches and hickey eyes on his back, chest and neck. He would make any comment or instruction, and make it sexual. He sexually harassed the young art teacher, and was removed from her classes. With all of these cases it wasn't any help that the principal was an idiot and that all the kids were little angels, and would never discipline them. Needless to say, I don't work there anymore lol. I'm not a teacher, but this story is creepy enough to make up for that. In elementary school, 2nd or 3rd grade, my class got a new student. He was very mean and bullied just about anyone that he could. He made cruel jokes, and drew disturbing pictures, and picked on everyone. He was very angry, and had outbursts, and disobeyed our class rules frequently. I think he might have gotten into some physical fights, and I'm also pretty sure I remember him hurting himself on several occasions. I'm sorry that I can't really remember the details, because it was so long ago. In our classroom, we had our desks grouped together, about 4 or 5 at a time, to make tables. I was lucky enough to have him sitting right across from me, and he would often be nasty and rude. I'm sure that I wasn't very nice to him either, but he tormented the whole class, and was disrespectful to our teacher. I just want to give some brief backstory about our art class. There was one art teacher for our entire school. Her name was Mrs. Whitney, and she was one of the loveliest, sweetest, and kindest human beings I've ever met. I don't think I'd ever heard any kids say anything bad about her at all. That was until the day this whole story is about. The kid had gotten into trouble during art class. I don't remember what exactly for. I just remember that he was doing something he definitely should have been and was being nasty and defiant to Mrs. Whitney when she reprimanded him. He was angrier than I'd ever seen him before. Later on, after art class was over and we were back at our desks, I noticed him drawing a picture. He started talking about how much he hated Mrs. Whitney and called her a bitch, which was something that shocked me to death at that time being so young. I told him to stop talking about her that way, but he didn't. He showed me his picture and then told me that he wanted to chop off her boobs with a samurai sword. He was laughing and smiling and making chopping motions. That image is forever burned into my brain and I can still hear him say those words. I have no idea what happened to him. He didn't return the next school year. Now that I'm older, this story makes me as sad as it horrified me then. I wonder if he was being abused at home, and I wonder how many other schools he might have gone to. I sometimes wonder what he's doing now, and if he's any better. Hopefully he never actually mutilated anyone or anything, and is much more stable now. I also hope he hasn't become an owner of a samurai sword. When I was in junior high school, 9th grade, we had a science fair. This one kid entered his science project that completely struck me as odd. His science experiment was about whether or not a person could contact the dead or spirits that our traditional equipment in science could not. Pinned to his cardboard display was a paper written by him and what another dead spirit had told him about his previous life. I can't remember what the dead spirit's name was, and only that it was an older man, but I noticed there was a box in front of the display that said "Do not touch" in bold black marker. One of my other classmates told me that there was a Ouija board inside it. After seeing pictures of a Ouija board on left side of his poster board, I didn't spend much more time looking at it and moved on to the next one. There were multiple classrooms in the science lab and projects set up in every room for us to tour. While still in the same room and looking at another project, I saw a kid out of the corner of my eye lift the top of the box that was marked "Do not open." I then watched more closely to see for myself what it was. The kid then starts to pull the Ouija board out of the box and smile as he thought it was funny. Before he could pull it completely out of the box, the kid who obviously made it came bolting into the room faster than the speed of light, leaped in the air, and landed on top of the other kid, basically pushing the kid to the ground, growling, clawing at, and biting the kid's ear. I just stood there and almost shit myself. A teacher or maybe two, I can't remember, probably in shock, came and pulled the poor kid out from underneath the wild maniac and managed to separate him from the other kid. The entire room was trashed in the process and the kid's ear was bleeding and bite marks everywhere. The kid was suspended for 3 days. That year he repeatedly got in trouble and was put in school suspension, a separate building on school grounds, for behavioral issues. The last time anyone saw him at school he had escaped from that building 15 minutes before lunch and had teachers notify authorities that he had ran off school grounds, or so that's what they thought, because of the note he had left behind. What he really did was access the main school building and hid in an empty locker close to the cafeteria. As soon as the lunch bell rang that corresponded with his girlfriend's lunch period, he slipped out of the locker while the hallway was packed. He convinced her to sneak off campus with him. Then he convinced her to go back to her place, hide him for the day, and later that night, to steal her own mum's purse, credit cards, and car keys. Last I heard the police were looking for them in the car. Never found out.